Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Library. It's wonderful to have you here tonight. Before we begin our journey into the world of ecosystems, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Perhaps you're tucked into your favorite spot in bed. Maybe you're on a quiet evening walk, or settled into a cozy chair with a soft blanket nearby. Wherever you are, I hope you're comfortable and ready to let your mind wander gently through the peaceful wonders of nature. If you enjoy these relaxing explorations of science and nature, a like and subscribe truly helps this channel continue to grow and bring you more calming content. And to those of you who are already subscribed, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support means everything. Tonight, we're going to explore something truly remarkable, something that happens all around us, every single day, in forests and oceans, in deserts and wetlands, in your backyard and in faraway places you've never seen. We're going to discover how ecosystems stay balanced, how nature, with all its complexity and beauty, manages to keep everything working together in harmony. Now, I'll try not to make this so interesting that you can't fall asleep. But if it does keep you awake for a little while, at least you'll drift off knowing more about the incredible ways that plants, animals, soil, water, and air all work together like an orchestra playing a gentle symphony. So let's begin, shall we? Let's step softly into the world of ecosystems and discover how balance is maintained in nature's grand design. Imagine standing in a forest on a quiet morning. The sun filters through the leaves above, creating patches of golden light on the forest floor. You hear birds singing in the branches. You notice insects buzzing around flowers. Maybe you see a squirrel darting up a tree trunk. Beneath your feet, the soil is alive with creatures you can't even see. Earthworms tunnel through the dirt. Tiny bacteria and fungi work their magic on fallen leaves. This forest is what scientists call an ecosystem. An ecosystem is simply a community of living things, all sharing a space and interacting with each other and with their surroundings. The word might sound complicated, but it's really quite simple. It's just all the plants, all the animals, all the tiny organisms, plus the air, the water, the soil, and the sunlight, all mixed together in one place. Ecosystems come in all shapes and sizes. A vast ocean is an ecosystem. A small pond in someone's backyard is an ecosystem too. A desert with its cacti and lizards is an ecosystem. Even a rotting log in the woods with its mushrooms and beetles and centipedes is its own little ecosystem. What makes ecosystems so fascinating is that everything inside them is connected. Nothing exists alone. Every plant needs sunlight, water, and nutrients from the soil. Every animal needs food and shelter. Every living thing depends on other living things in some way. It's like an invisible web, connecting everything together. And here's the really amazing part. When an ecosystem is healthy and balanced, all these connections work smoothly. The number of plants is just right. The number of animals eating those plants is just right. The number of bigger animals eating those smaller animals is just right. Everything flows together naturally, like a river following its course. But what keeps ecosystems balanced? What stops one type of animal from eating all the plants? What prevents certain creatures from taking over completely? How does nature maintain this delicate harmony? These are the questions we'll explore together tonight, slowly and gently, one peaceful idea at a time. To understand how ecosystems stay balanced, we first need to understand what balance actually means in nature. When scientists talk about ecosystem balance, they're not talking about everything staying exactly the same forever. That's not how nature works. Instead, they're talking about a special kind of balance called dynamic equilibrium. Imagine a seesaw in a playground. When it's perfectly balanced, both sides stay level. But the moment someone gets on or off, it moves. It tips one way or the other. Nature's balance is more like a seesaw that's always gently moving up and down, but never tipping too far in any direction. In a balanced ecosystem, populations of different species might go up a little bit, then down a little bit, then up again. The number of rabbits in a field might increase one year, then decrease the next year, then increase again. But these changes stay within a certain range. The rabbit population doesn't shoot up so high that they eat every single plant in the field, and it doesn't drop so low that all the rabbits disappear forever. This gentle rise and fall, this constant adjustment, is what keeps ecosystems healthy. It's like breathing. Your chest rises and falls, but it stays within a normal, healthy pattern. Ecosystems breathe too, in their own way. Scientists have found that several key things work together to maintain this balance. Think of them as nature's balancing tools. Some of these tools control how many of each type of creature lives in an area. Some tools move energy from one living thing to another. Some tools recycle materials so nothing goes to waste. And some tools help the ecosystem bounce back when something goes wrong. Let's start with one of nature's most important balancing tools, the relationships between predators and prey. This is one of the most powerful ways that ecosystems stay in balance. In any ecosystem, some animals eat plants, and other animals eat those plant-eating animals. These relationships create what scientists call food chains. Picture a meadow. Grass grows in the meadow, using sunlight and water. A grasshopper eats the grass. A frog eats the grasshopper. A snake eats the frog. A hawk eats the snake. Each step in this chain transfers energy from one living thing to another. Now, here's where the balancing act comes in. Let's say there are lots of grasshoppers in our meadow one summer. They're munching on grass all day long. If nothing stopped them, they might eat so much grass that barely any would be left. But something does stop them. The frogs. With so many grasshoppers around, the frogs have plenty to eat. They thrive. The frog population grows. But when there are more frogs, they eat more grasshoppers. Slowly, the grasshopper population starts to shrink. There's less food for the frogs now. Some frogs might not find enough to eat. The frog population starts to decrease a little bit. With fewer frogs around, fewer grasshoppers get eaten. The grasshopper population starts to grow again, and the cycle continues. This back and forth between predators and prey is like a dance. It keeps both populations from getting too big or too small. The prey animals keep the plant populations in check. The predators keep the prey populations in check. Everything stays within a healthy range. Scientists have studied these relationships for more than 100 years. They've discovered mathematical patterns that describe how predator and prey populations rise and fall together. When prey is abundant, predators thrive and their numbers increase. But as predator numbers rise, they consume more prey, causing prey numbers to fall. This in turn causes predator numbers to fall because there's less food. Then prey numbers can recover and the whole cycle begins again. This might sound complicated, but think of it like this. Imagine you love pizza. If there's lots of pizza available, you're happy, and you might invite your friends over. But if everyone eats too much pizza, the pizza runs out. Then there's no pizza for anyone for a while. Eventually, more pizza is made, and the whole thing starts over. Predators and prey follow a similar pattern, except instead of pizza, we're talking about grasshoppers and frogs. These predator-prey relationships do more than just control numbers. They also affect where animals live and how they behave. A deer in a forest with wolves will be more careful about where it grazes. It might avoid open areas where wolves could spot it easily. This means the deer won't overgraze the plants in those open areas. The plants get a chance to grow and spread seeds. Other animals that depend on those plants have food and shelter. The presence of wolves, even if they don't catch every deer, changes the behavior of the deer in ways that help many other species. This brings us to one of nature's most important concepts, the idea of keystone species. A keystone is the central stone in an arch. It's the one at the very top that holds all the other stones in place. If you remove the keystone, the whole arch falls down. In ecosystems, keystone species work the same way. A keystone species is an animal or plant that has an enormous impact on its ecosystem, even if there aren't very many of them. When a keystone species is removed, the whole ecosystem changes dramatically. Sometimes it even collapses. One of the most famous examples comes from the rocky shores of the Pacific Ocean in North America. A scientist named Robert Payne studied these shores in the 1960s. He noticed that a certain type of sea star, a starfish with purplish color, seemed to be controlling everything. These starfish ate mussels. Mussels are shellfish that attach themselves to rocks. If left alone, mussels would cover every rock surface. They would crowd out barnacles, seaweed, and everything else. But the starfish kept the mussel population under control by eating them. To test his idea, Payne removed all the starfish from one section of the shore. He wanted to see what would happen. Within just a few months, the mussel population exploded. They covered the rocks. Other species started to disappear. The number of different types of creatures living in that area dropped from 15 species to just 8 species. The biodiversity plummeted, all because the starfish were gone. This experiment taught scientists something crucial. Even though the starfish weren't the biggest or most numerous creatures on the shore, they were absolutely essential for keeping the ecosystem balanced. They were a keystone species. Keystone species exist in ecosystems all over the world. Wolves in Yellowstone National Park are keystone species. When wolves were removed from Yellowstone in the early 1900s, the elk population grew too large. The elk ate so many young trees and shrubs that whole forests began to disappear. Rivers even changed shape, because without trees to hold the soil in place, the riverbanks eroded. When wolves were brought back to Yellowstone in 1995, the ecosystem began to heal. The elk became more cautious. Trees started growing back. Birds returned. Beavers came back and built dams. The rivers stabilized, all because of the wolves. Sea otters along the Pacific coast are keystone species too. They eat sea urchins. Sea urchins eat kelp, the tall seaweed that creates underwater forests. If sea otters disappear, sea urchins multiply and devour the kelp forests. Without kelp forests, countless fish, crabs, and other sea creatures lose their homes and food sources. The otters, by keeping sea urchins in check, maintain entire underwater ecosystems. Even some plants are keystone species. Fig trees in tropical rainforests produce fruit year-round. Many animals depend on figs when other food sources are scarce. Without fig trees, numerous birds, monkeys, and bats would struggle to survive during certain seasons. The fig trees hold the whole community together. Keystone species remind us that in ecosystems, it's not always about how many individuals there are. Sometimes it's about what role a species plays. A tiny organism with a big job can be more important than a common organism with a small job. Balance in nature depends on having the right species doing the right jobs, not just having lots of species. Now let's explore another crucial way that ecosystems stay balanced, through the recycling of nutrients. In nature, nothing is wasted. Everything gets used again and again in an endless cycle. Think about all the things living creatures need to survive. They need carbon to build their bodies. They need nitrogen to make proteins. They need phosphorus for energy. They need water, oxygen, and many other substances. Where do these materials come from? And what happens to them when a plant or animal passes on? The answer is beautiful in its simplicity. Nature recycles everything. The atoms that are in your body right now might once have been part of a dinosaur, a fern in an ancient forest, or a fish swimming in a prehistoric ocean. Matter moves through ecosystems in great cycles, returning again and again to be used by new generations of living things. Let's follow the journey of carbon, one of the most important substances for life. Carbon is everywhere. It's in the air as carbon dioxide. It's in every living thing on Earth. It's in the soil. It's in the ocean. And it moves through all these places in what scientists call the carbon cycle. Here's how it works. Plants are remarkable because they can take carbon dioxide from the air and use it to build their bodies. They do this through a process called photosynthesis. Using energy from sunlight, plants combine carbon dioxide from the air with water from the ground to make sugar. This sugar contains carbon. The plant uses this sugar to grow leaves, stems, roots, flowers, and seeds. All of these plant parts are made partly from carbon that was once in the air. When an animal eats a plant, the carbon in that plant becomes part of the animal. A rabbit eats grass and incorporates the carbon from the grass into its own body. A fox eats the rabbit and incorporates the carbon from the rabbit into its body. The carbon keeps moving up the food chain. But what happens when the fox eventually passes away? This is where decomposers come in, and they're absolutely vital for keeping ecosystems balanced. Decomposers are nature's recyclers. They're mostly tiny organisms that you can't see without a microscope. Bacteria and fungi are the most important decomposers. But some insects and worms help with decomposition too. When a leaf falls from a tree, or when an animal passes away, decomposers get to work. They break down the dead material. They essentially eat it, using it for their own energy and growth. In the process, they release nutrients back into the environment. Carbon goes back into the air as carbon dioxide. Nitrogen goes back into the soil as minerals that plants can use. Phosphorus is released back into the soil or water. All the building blocks of life become available again for new plants and animals to use. Without decomposers, passed-on plants and animals would just pile up. Nutrients would be locked away in their bodies, unavailable for new life. The whole system would grind to a halt. But because decomposers work constantly, breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients, the cycle continues smoothly. Picture a forest in autumn. Leaves turn brilliant colors and fall to the ground. Over the winter and spring, those leaves slowly disappear. They don't vanish into nothing. Decomposers break them down, turning them into rich soil. In the spring, new plants sprout from that soil, using the recycled nutrients from last year's leaves. It's a perfect circle. Endings become beginnings. The same thing happens in oceans, grasslands, deserts, and every other ecosystem. Decomposers work everywhere, ensuring that nutrients keep flowing through the system. They're the reason that Earth doesn't run out of the basic materials needed for life. They're recycling centers operating 24 hours a day, every day, in every ecosystem on the planet. Nutrient cycling does more than just provide materials for life. It also helps maintain balance. When nutrients are scarce in an ecosystem, plant growth slows down. This limits how many plant-eating animals can survive. This, in turn, limits how many predators can survive. The whole ecosystem adjusts to the available nutrients. It's another feedback loop that helps keep populations in check. Energy flow through ecosystems is another critical factor in maintaining balance. But energy flow is different from nutrient cycling in one very important way. Nutrients cycle round and round, being used over and over. But energy flows in just one direction. It enters the ecosystem, flows through it, and then leaves. Let me explain. Almost all the energy in ecosystems comes from the sun. Sunlight pours down on Earth every day, bathing forests, fields, and oceans in warmth and light. Plants are amazing because they can capture this sunlight and turn it into chemical energy stored in their tissues. This process, photosynthesis, is the foundation of nearly all life on Earth. When a plant uses sunlight to make sugar, it's converting light energy into chemical energy. That energy is now stored in the plant's leaves, stems, and roots. The plant uses some of this energy to live, grow, and reproduce, but some remains stored in its tissues. When an animal eats the plant, that stored energy becomes available to the animal. The rabbit eating grass is really eating stored sunlight energy. The rabbit's body uses this energy to move, stay warm, grow, and do all the things rabbits need to do. But here's the key point. Only about 10% of the energy in the grass actually becomes part of the rabbit's body. The rest is used by the rabbit for living, or is lost as heat. When a fox eats a rabbit, the same thing happens. Only about 10% of the energy in the rabbit becomes part of the fox. The rest is used up or lost as heat. This means that energy decreases as it moves up the food chain. Each step up loses about 90% of the energy from the step below. This energy loss is why there are always far more plants than plant eaters, and far more plant eaters than meat eaters. There simply isn't enough energy to support huge numbers of top predators. The energy has been reduced too much by the time it reaches them. Think of it like a water fountain. The water starts at the top, flowing down through several levels. Each level gets less water than the level above it because some water splashes out at each step. By the bottom level, there's much less water than there was at the top. Energy in ecosystems works the same way. This energy flow helps maintain balance because it naturally limits how many creatures can exist at each level. An ecosystem can support millions of grass plants. It can support thousands of grasshoppers eating that grass. It can support hundreds of frogs eating those grasshoppers. It can support dozens of snakes eating those frogs. And it can support just a few hawks eating those snakes. The energy pyramid naturally shapes the ecosystem. The energy also never runs out completely because the sun keeps shining. Every day, new energy enters the ecosystem through photosynthesis. As long as the sun keeps rising, energy keeps flowing through the food web. It's a one-way flow, from the sun to plants to animals to decomposers, and finally leaving the ecosystem as heat. But the supply never stops because the sun never stops shining. Now let's talk about something that might seem obvious, but is actually quite profound. Biodiversity itself helps keep ecosystems balanced. Biodiversity simply means the variety of different species living in an ecosystem. The more different types of plants, animals, and other organisms in an ecosystem, the more balanced and healthy it tends to be. Why does having more species help? There are several reasons, and they all work together to create stability. First, when there are many different species, the ecosystem has what scientists call functional redundancy. This means that several different species might do similar jobs. Imagine a meadow with 10 different types of flowers. If one type of flower gets a disease and starts to struggle, the other 9 types can keep doing their job of providing nectar for bees. The bees still have plenty of food. If there were only one type of flower and it got sick, the bees would be in serious trouble. This is like having backup systems. Airplanes have backup instruments in case the main ones fail. Your body has 2 kidneys, even though you can survive with one. Ecosystems work the same way. Having multiple species that can perform similar functions means the ecosystem can keep working even if something happens to one species. Second, different species often use resources in slightly different ways. In a forest, different trees grow to different heights. Some love full sunlight, so they grow tall and spread their branches wide. Some prefer shade, so they grow shorter and thrive under the taller trees. Some have deep roots that reach far into the ground for water. Others have shallow roots that spread wide near the surface. Because these trees are all slightly different, they can all live together without competing too much. They've divided up the resources. This is called resource partitioning, and it's another way biodiversity maintains balance. When species use resources in different ways, more species can live in the same space without anyone running out of what they need. It's like how a library has books for children, books for adults, books about science, books about history, and books about cooking. Different people use different books, so everyone can find what they need. Third, ecosystems with high biodiversity are more resilient. Resilience means the ability to recover after something bad happens. A storm might knock down trees. A drought might shrink a pond. A harsh winter might reduce the number of certain animals. These disturbances happen naturally. But diverse ecosystems can bounce back more easily. If an ecosystem has many different plant species, and a drought harms the species that need lots of water, the drought-tolerant species can take over temporarily. They'll provide food and shelter for animals until the water-loving plants recover. If an ecosystem only had the water-loving plants, a drought would devastate it completely. Scientists have compared diverse ecosystems with less diverse ones and found that the diverse ones are indeed more stable. They maintain their productivity even when conditions change. They recover faster from disturbances. They're like a well-built house that can withstand storms better than a shaky structure. However, biodiversity alone isn't magic. You can't just have lots of species thrown together randomly and expect everything to work perfectly. The species need to interact with each other in ways that create stability. They need to form food webs. They need to recycle nutrients. They need to have predators and prey, decomposers and producers, all working together. Biodiversity helps, but the relationships between species matter just as much. Sometimes, ecosystems can exist in different stable states. This is a fascinating concept. It means that the same physical environment could support very different communities of plants and animals, and each community could be stable. Imagine a grassland. In one state, it might be dominated by grasses with scattered shrubs. Grazers like antelope keep the shrubs in check by eating young plants before they can grow large. Fire occasionally burns through, which grasses survive well, but shrubs don't. This grassland state is stable. But imagine something changes. Maybe people remove the grazers or prevent fires for many years. Shrubs start to grow more successfully. They get bigger and more numerous. Eventually, there are so many shrubs that they shade out the grasses. The grassland becomes a shrubland. This new state is also stable. The shrubs keep out the grasses. Now, even if you brought the grazers back, the shrubland might stay a shrubland, because the grazers can't eat through all those big woody shrubs. These alternative stable states show us that ecosystems can flip from one balanced condition to another balanced condition. Sometimes these flips happen naturally. Other times, human activities push ecosystems from one state to another. Overfishing in the ocean can flip a kelp forest ecosystem into an urchin barren, where sea urchins cover the ocean floor and barely any kelp grows. Both states are stable, but one is much more biodiverse and productive than the other. Understanding these alternative states helps us realize that ecosystem balance isn't just one specific condition. Balance can look different in different situations, but some balanced states are healthier and more productive than others. Nature is flexible, but not all flexibility is good. Seasonal changes offer a wonderful example of how ecosystems maintain balance through time. Many ecosystems experience dramatic changes throughout the year, yet they remain balanced because the species living there are adapted to these cycles. In a temperate forest, spring brings warming temperatures and longer days. Plants burst into growth, trees unfurl new leaves, flowers bloom. Insects emerge from winter dormancy. Birds return from their winter homes in warmer places. The forest buzzes with activity. This is a time of abundance. Plenty of food, plenty of energy. Populations grow. Summer continues this abundance. Everything is green and lush. Baby animals are born and grow quickly, taking advantage of the plentiful food. Predators feast on the abundance of prey. The ecosystem hums along at full capacity. Then autumn arrives. Days grow shorter, temperatures cool. Plants stop growing and prepare for winter. Trees pull nutrients from their leaves before dropping them. Animals that can migrate start their journeys south. Animals that will stay behind begin storing food and building up fat reserves. Seeds are buried, nuts are cached. Everyone is preparing for the lean times ahead. Winter brings cold and often snow. Many plants are dormant, appearing lifeless, but actually very much alive beneath the surface, waiting. Some animals hibernate, sleeping through the months when food is scarce. Others remain active, but must work hard to find enough to eat. The ecosystem slows down, energy use decreases. Populations shrink a little as some individuals don't survive the winter. But this is natural. It's part of the balance. Then spring returns and the cycle begins again. The ecosystem breathes in and out with the seasons. It expands and contracts, but it maintains its overall structure. The same basic community of species returns year after year. The seasonal changes don't destroy the balance. They are part of the balance. Ecosystems in tropical areas don't experience temperature seasons like temperate ecosystems do, but they often have wet and dry seasons that create similar cycles. During the rainy season, plants thrive and animals reproduce. During the dry season, some plants lose their leaves and animals must find water sources carefully. The ecosystem adjusts to these predictable changes. These seasonal rhythms are important for maintaining balance because they prevent populations from growing too large. If every season were perfect growing season, plant-eating animals might multiply until they exceeded what the ecosystem could support long-term. The difficult seasons keep populations in check naturally. They're like a built-in control system. Migration is another fascinating way that some species respond to seasonal changes and help maintain ecosystem balance across vast distances. Many animals don't stay in one place year-round. Instead, they travel between different areas, following favorable conditions. Birds are perhaps the most famous migrants. Billions of birds migrate between summer breeding grounds and winter feeding areas each year. A tiny warbler, weighing less than a coin, might fly thousands of miles from Canada to Central America and back again. Arctic terns hold the migration record, traveling from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back, covering more than 40,000 miles in a year. Why do they go to such effort? Because migration allows them to take advantage of seasonal abundance in different places. During Northern Hemisphere summer, the long days and explosion of insect life in northern forests provide perfect conditions for raising young birds. The parent birds can find plenty of food to feed their hungry chicks. But when winter comes and insects disappear, the birds fly south to where food is still available. They're following the resources, moving to where the ecosystem can support them. This movement of birds between ecosystems has important effects on balance. When millions of birds arrive in their breeding grounds each spring, they consume enormous numbers of insects. This keeps insect populations from exploding. The birds also spread seeds and nutrients. When they migrate, they're connecting different ecosystems, moving energy and materials between them. Caribou and wildebeest are famous land migrators. Caribou in northern Canada travel hundreds of miles between their winter forests and summer tundra feeding grounds. In Africa, over 1 million wildebeest migrate in a great circular route through the Serengeti ecosystem, following the rains and the fresh grass that springs up after them. These massive movements of herbivores shape the landscape. Their grazing prevents any one area from being overgrazed. As they move, they deposit waste that fertilizes the soil. Their migration maintains balance across huge regions. Even some fish migrate remarkable distances. Salmon are born in freshwater streams, swim to the ocean where they grow large, then return to their birth streams to reproduce. This migration moves nutrients from the ocean back to the streams and forests. When salmon return to spawn, they bring with them the accumulated nutrients from years of feeding in the rich ocean waters. After spawning, the salmon pass on and their bodies decompose, releasing those ocean nutrients into the stream ecosystem. Bears, eagles, and other predators catch salmon and carry them into the forest, spreading nutrients even farther. Scientists have found ocean nutrients in trees hundreds of feet from the stream, delivered there by salmon and the animals that eat them. Monarch butterflies undertake one of nature's most remarkable migrations. These delicate insects travel from Mexico to Canada and back, though no single butterfly makes the complete round trip. It takes multiple generations. Butterflies born in Mexico fly north in spring. They lay eggs along the way. Their offspring continue north, and their offspring after them. By late summer, monarchs are spread across much of North America. Then, somehow, the final generation of the year undertakes a journey their great-grandparents made. These butterflies, who have never been to Mexico, fly thousands of miles south to the exact same mountain forests where their ancestors spent the previous winter. How they navigate remains mysterious, but their migration connects ecosystems across a continent. Migration patterns evolved over thousands of years as species adapted to seasonal changes in their environments. These patterns are part of the natural balance. The ecosystems that migrants visit depend on their arrival and departure. Timing matters enormously. If migrants arrive too early, before their food sources are abundant, they might struggle. If they arrive too late, they might miss the peak of food availability. Over time, migration timing has synchronized with the seasonal rhythms of ecosystems. However, climate change is now shifting seasonal patterns, sometimes causing mismatches. Plants might bloom earlier than usual. If migrant birds arrive at their normal time, they might find that the caterpillars they need to feed their chicks have already peaked and are now scarce. These mismatches can affect breeding success and disrupt the balance that migration maintained. Disturbances are events that disrupt ecosystems. A wildfire burns through a forest, a flood sweeps across a meadow, a hurricane batters a coastline. A tree falls in the woods, creating a gap in the canopy. These might seem destructive, but many disturbances actually help maintain ecosystem balance in the long run. Let's think about fire for a moment. In many grasslands and forests, fires have burned naturally for thousands of years, started by lightning strikes. Some plants have adapted to fire. Prairie grasses, for example, have deep roots that survive underground, while the above-ground parts burn. After a fire, the grasses regrow quickly from those protected roots. Trees that aren't fire-adapted can't invade the prairie as easily because fire keeps killing their seedlings. Without occasional fires, some prairies would slowly turn into forests. The trees would gradually take over. The prairie grasses and the animals that depend on open grasslands would lose their habitat. But fire maintains the balance, keeping the prairie as prairie. Some plants have gone even further in adapting to fire. Certain pine trees have cones that only open and release their seeds after being heated by fire. They've evolved to take advantage of the fresh soil and lack of competition that follows a fire. Their seedlings sprout in the ash-enriched soil and grow rapidly without mature trees blocking their sunlight. Floods work similarly in river ecosystems. When a river floods, it might seem chaotic and destructive. Water spreads across the floodplain, covering areas that are usually dry. But this flooding deposits nutrient-rich sediment on the floodplain. It creates pools and channels where fish can spawn. It scours away old vegetation and makes room for new growth. Many river ecosystems depend on regular flooding to maintain their balance. Even small disturbances play important roles. When a large tree falls in a forest, it creates a gap in the canopy. Sunlight suddenly reaches the forest floor in that spot. Seedlings that were waiting in the shade can now grow rapidly. Different species compete for that sunny spot. Eventually, new trees fill the gap. But in the meantime, the forest has a small patch of different conditions, creating habitat diversity. Some animals prefer these gaps, some plants only grow in them. The patchwork of different aged trees and gaps creates a richer, more balanced ecosystem than a uniform forest would be. The key to disturbance is that it happens at the right scale and frequency. Small, occasional disturbances create diversity and maintain balance. Huge, frequent disturbances can overwhelm an ecosystem and prevent it from recovering. Nature has generally settled into patterns where disturbances occur often enough to maintain balance, but not so often that they cause collapse. Ecological succession is the process by which ecosystems change and develop over time. And understanding succession helps us see how balance emerges and is maintained through gradual transformation. When a new area becomes available for life, whether it's a fresh lava flow, a sand dune, or an abandoned farm field, nature follows a somewhat predictable sequence of changes as the ecosystem develops. Primary succession occurs in places where no soil exists. Imagine a volcanic island that just emerged from the ocean, made of bare lava rock. Nothing lives there initially, but eventually spores of lichens and mosses drift in on the wind. These pioneer species are tough. They can survive with minimal nutrients and can cling to bare rock. As they grow, they trap dust and moisture. When they pass on, their remains begin to form the first thin layer of soil. With a little soil available, more species can arrive. Small plants with wind-blown seeds might sprout. These early colonizers tend to be fast-growing species that can tolerate harsh conditions. They continue building the soil. Their roots crack the rock, helping it weather into minerals. Their remains add organic matter. Over years or decades, the soil deepens. As soil improves, more demanding species can survive. Shrubs might take root. They grow larger than the pioneering herbs and grasses. They create shade. This changes conditions for other species. Some of the early sun-loving species might struggle now that it's shadier. But shade-tolerant species move in. The ecosystem is transforming. Eventually, if conditions allow, trees might arrive. Tree seeds are heavier than grass seeds, so they take longer to reach new areas. But once trees establish themselves, they dominate. They grow tall, casting deep shade. The ecosystem transitions from grassland to shrubland to forest. Each stage creates conditions for the next stage. This sequence, from bare ground to mature forest, might take decades or even centuries, but it represents a progression toward a more complex, more stable ecosystem. Early succession ecosystems are simple, with few species. Late succession ecosystems are complex, with many species and intricate relationships. The end point of succession, when the ecosystem has reached its most mature state for that climate and location, is called the climax community. A climax community is relatively stable. It can maintain itself. The species present can reproduce successfully under the conditions they themselves create. A mature forest is a climax community. The shade-tolerant trees that dominate can reproduce in their own shade. Their seedlings grow up to replace them when they eventually pass on. Secondary succession happens when an ecosystem is disturbed but soil remains. An abandoned farm field undergoes secondary succession. Weeds and grasses colonize quickly from seeds already in the soil. Within a few years, shrubs appear. After a decade or two, young trees take hold. Over time, the field gradually transitions back toward forest. Secondary succession is usually faster than primary succession because soil and seed banks are already present. Succession demonstrates that ecosystem balance is dynamic, not static. Young ecosystems and mature ecosystems have different characteristics. Young ecosystems change rapidly. Species composition shifts, productivity increases. Mature ecosystems change more slowly. Species composition becomes more stable. The ecosystem reaches an equilibrium where production and decomposition balance each other. Interestingly, succession isn't always a one-way process toward greater complexity. Disturbances can reset succession, sending a mature ecosystem back to an earlier stage. A fire in a forest creates openings where succession begins again. A flood might scour away vegetation, exposing bare soil. These resets are natural and important. They create a mosaic of different successional stages across a landscape, which increases overall biodiversity. Some species thrive in early succession. Others need mature ecosystems. Having both available supports more species. Humans sometimes interrupt succession in ways that prevent ecosystems from reaching maturity. Regular mowing keeps a lawn in a very early successional stage. Without mowing, your lawn would eventually become a forest, going through all the successional stages. Agriculture holds fields in early succession perpetually. We clear away natural vegetation each year and plant crops, preventing the natural progression toward shrubland and forest. Understanding succession helps us appreciate that balance in ecosystems can look different at different stages. A young forest has different species and processes than an old forest. Both can be balanced and healthy, just in different ways. Balance doesn't mean unchanging. It means that the processes happening are appropriate for the stage of development, and that the ecosystem can maintain itself or progress naturally toward the next stage. Climate plays an enormous role in shaping ecosystems and maintaining balance. Different climates support different ecosystems. The cold temperatures and short growing season of the Arctic tundra create an ecosystem very different from the warm, wet conditions of a tropical rainforest. Within each climate zone, ecosystems are balanced around the typical conditions. Plants and animals are adapted to the amount of rainfall, the temperature range, the length of growing season, and all the other features of their climate. A desert ecosystem is balanced around water scarcity. Desert plants store water in their tissues. Desert animals get water from their food and have behaviors to avoid the hottest times of day. The whole system works because all the species have adaptations suited to dry conditions. But climate isn't constant. It varies from year to year. Some years are wetter than average. Some years are drier. Some years are hotter or colder. These variations test the ecosystem's resilience. During a wet year, certain species might thrive. During a dry year, different species might have advantages. Over time, these variations average out, and the ecosystem maintains its overall character. Long-term climate change, however, can shift ecosystems into new states. As Earth's climate has changed throughout history, ecosystems have migrated, with species moving to track suitable conditions. When the climate warmed after the last ice age, forests spread northward into areas that had been tundra. Animals followed the shifting habitats. Ecosystems maintained their balance by moving across the landscape. The pace of climate change matters enormously. Slow changes allow species to adapt or migrate. Rapid changes can overwhelm ecosystems, causing species to go extinct before they can adjust. The balance can be broken if change happens too quickly. Soil might not seem exciting, but it's absolutely crucial for games. Maintaining ecosystem balance, especially in land ecosystems. Soil is not just dirt. It's a living, breathing system full of organisms and minerals. Healthy soil contains minerals weathered from rocks. It contains organic matter from decomposed plants and animals. It contains billions of bacteria, miles of fungal threads, countless tiny animals like mites and springtails, and larger creatures like earthworms and beetles. All these organisms work together to create and maintain soil structure. The organic matter in soil holds moisture and nutrients. The organisms break down organic matter and release nutrients that plants can absorb through their roots. Fungi form partnerships with plant roots, helping the plants gather nutrients from a larger area of soil. In exchange, the plants provide the fungi with sugars from photosynthesis. This partnership, called mycorrhizae, is found in most land plants and is essential for their health. Soil quality directly affects plant growth. Healthy, nutrient-rich soil supports lush plant growth. Poor, depleted soil supports fewer plants. Since plants form the base of most food webs, soil health affects the entire ecosystem. More plants mean more plant eaters. More plant eaters mean more predators. Good soil creates a foundation for ecosystem balance. Soil also holds onto water, releasing it slowly over time. This prevents floods and droughts from being as severe. It moderates the water supply for plants and animals. Deep, spongy soil in a forest can absorb heavy rainfall and then slowly release that water to streams over the following weeks. This creates steady water flow instead of feast or famine conditions. The organisms in soil help maintain nutrient cycles. They're the decomposers we talked about earlier. Without them constantly breaking down organic matter, nutrients would be locked up and unavailable. The balance between nutrient input, the adding of nutrient through decomposition and weathering, and nutrient output, the removal of nutrients when nutrients wash away or are taken up by plants, determines soil fertility and shapes what can grow. The invisible world of microorganisms plays an absolutely vital role in maintaining ecosystem balance, and we should take a moment to appreciate these tiny beings that we cannot see with our naked eyes. Bacteria, archaea, viruses, protists, and microscopic fungi make up the majority of Earth's biodiversity and perform essential functions in every ecosystem. Bacteria are perhaps the most important microorganisms for ecosystem balance. They exist in unimaginable numbers. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains billions of bacteria. They perform crucial roles in nutrient cycling. Some bacteria decompose organic matter, breaking down complex molecules into simpler compounds. Others transform nutrients from one chemical form to another. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria are especially important. Nitrogen gas makes up about 78% of Earth's atmosphere, but most organisms cannot use nitrogen gas directly. It must be converted into forms like ammonia or nitrate. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria, living in soil or in special structures on the roots of certain plants like beans and clover, can convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms plants can use. This process, nitrogen fixation, is essential for life. Without it, nitrogen would remain locked in the atmosphere, unavailable to plants. Plants need nitrogen to make proteins, the building blocks of their cells. Other bacteria, called nitrifying bacteria, convert ammonia into nitrate. Still other bacteria, denitrifying bacteria, convert nitrates back into nitrogen gas, completing the nitrogen cycle. Each type of bacteria plays a specific role. Together, they keep nitrogen moving through the ecosystem, available to all organisms that need it. Bacteria also live in the digestive systems of many animals, helping them break down their food. Termites couldn't digest wood without bacteria and protists in their guts that break down cellulose. Cows and other ruminants depend on bacteria in their specialized stomachs to ferment plant material and make its nutrients available. These partnerships between animals and their gut microbes are essential for the animal's survival and affect how efficiently they can use the plant resources in their ecosystem. Fungi deserve special attention too. While we often notice mushrooms, these are just the reproductive structures of fungi. The main body of a fungus consists of thread-like structures called hyphae that spread through soil, wood, or whatever the fungus is growing in. These networks can be enormous. The largest known organism on Earth is a honey fungus in Oregon that covers thousands of acres. All one individual, connected through underground hyphae. Fungi are master decomposers. They produce enzymes that can break down tough plant materials like cellulose and lignin, the woody compound in trees. Without fungi, fallen trees would accumulate and never rot. Fungi recycle carbon and other nutrients locked in wood, making them available for new life. In forests, fungi are responsible for much of the decomposition that occurs. The mycorrhizal partnerships between fungi and plant roots that we mentioned earlier involve about 90% of all land plant species. The fungal networks extend far beyond where plant roots reach, effectively giving plants access to a much larger soil volume. The fungi absorb water and nutrients and share them with the plant. The plant shares sugars produced through photosynthesis with the fungi. It's a fair trade that benefits both parties. Recent research has revealed that mycorrhizal networks connect multiple plants, even plants of different species. They form what scientists call the wood wide web, underground fungal networks that link plants together. Through these networks, resources can move from one plant to another. A tree in full sunlight might share some of its sugars with a seedling, growing in deep shade. An older tree might support its offspring. The network creates a kind of ecosystem within the ecosystem, a subterranean system of mutual support. Protists are another group of microorganisms important for balance. These are single-celled organisms that are more complex than bacteria. Some protists are plant-like and perform photosynthesis. Phytoplankton in the ocean are mostly protists. They form the base of ocean food webs and produce much of Earth's oxygen. Other protists are animal-like, hunting and consuming bacteria and other protists. They're predators in the microscopic world, helping control bacterial populations. In soil, protist predators feed on bacteria, releasing nutrients that plants can then absorb. Without these microscopic predators, nutrients would remain tied up in bacterial cells. The predation at the microscopic scale helps keep nutrients flowing through the ecosystem. Even viruses, which are not technically alive, play roles in ecosystem balance. Viruses infect and attack bacteria, other microorganisms, plants, and animals. While we often think of viruses as harmful, in ecosystems they help regulate populations. Viruses that infect bacteria keep bacterial populations from becoming too large. When a virus attacks and eliminates a bacterial cell, the nutrients from that cell are released, becoming available to other organisms. In the ocean, viruses play a major role in nutrient cycling through their effects on bacteria and phytoplankton. The microbial world operates at scales we rarely think about, but it's fundamental to ecosystem balance. Without microorganisms, nutrient cycles would stop. Decomposition would cease. Nitrogen would be unavailable. Primary production would collapse. The entire visible world of plants and animals depends on the invisible world of microbes working beneath our notice. They are the true foundation of ecosystem balance, the tiny workers maintaining the essential processes that allow all other life to exist. Water is another fundamental resource that shapes ecosystem balance. The amount of water available affects everything. Aquatic ecosystems, those in water, are obviously entirely dependent on water. But land ecosystems need water too. All living things require water for their cells to function. In aquatic ecosystems, water quality matters as much as quantity. Temperature affects how much oxygen can dissolve in water. Fish and other aquatic creatures need that oxygen to breathe. Cold water holds more oxygen than warm water, which is why cold streams often support different fish species than warm streams. Nutrients in the water affect plant growth. Too few nutrients and plants struggle. But too many nutrients can be just as problematic. When excess nutrients enter a lake from pollution, algae can grow explosively, forming huge blooms. When the algae eventually release and decompose, bacteria consuming them use up oxygen in the water. Fish suffocate. The lake loses balance and becomes unhealthy. This process is called eutrophication. The balance of nutrients in water is delicate. Natural processes maintain this balance through the flow of water, through the activities of organisms, and through chemical reactions. But human activities can disrupt this balance by adding too many nutrients from fertilizer runoff or sewage. Freshwater ecosystems like streams and rivers maintain balance through flow. Water moves continuously from upstream to downstream. This flow carries nutrients, oxygen, and organisms. It prevents stagnation. It creates diverse habitats. Fast-flowing rapids have different species than slow pools. The connection between different parts of the stream, from mountain headwaters to lowland mouth, creates a complete ecosystem. In oceans, currents perform similar functions. They move water masses around the globe, distributing heat and nutrients. Upwelling zones, where deep water rises to the surface, bring nutrients from the ocean depths up to the sunlit surface waters. These nutrients fuel phytoplankton growth, tiny floating plants that form the base of ocean food webs. The phytoplankton support zooplankton, tiny floating animals. These support small fish, which support larger fish, which support even larger predators like tuna and sharks. Ocean balance depends on these nutrient movements. The interaction between land and water ecosystems also matters for balance. Rivers carry nutrients from land to ocean. Coastal wetlands filter water before it reaches the ocean, removing excess nutrients and sediments. Mangrove forests along tropical coastlines stabilize shores, provide habitat for young fish, and filter water. These transition zones between land and water are hotspots of biodiversity and are crucial for maintaining balance in both ecosystems. Competition is another force that helps maintain ecosystem balance. When two species need the same resource, they compete for it. This competition can limit population growth and prevent any one species from taking over completely. Imagine two species of birds that both eat the same type of seed. If one species is slightly better at finding the seeds, it might get more food. Its population might grow a little larger. But there's a limit. As that species becomes more numerous, the seeds become harder to find because so many birds are looking for them. The birds have to spend more time and energy searching. Eventually, the population stops growing because the birds can't find enough food to support more individuals. Competition happens between species, like in the bird example, but it also happens within species. Individual plants of the same species compete with each other for sunlight, water, and nutrients. They can't all grow equally large. Some end up shaded by others, some get less water. The competition naturally thins out the population so that the surviving individuals have enough resources. Competition drives species to become different from each other over time. If two species compete strongly for the same resource, natural selection favors individuals that can use a slightly different resource. Over many generations, the two species might become specialized for different things, reducing their competition. This is part of how biodiversity develops and how multiple species can coexist in the same ecosystem. However, competition doesn't always lead to balance. Sometimes one species outcompetes another so thoroughly that the inferior competitor goes extinct locally. This is more likely to happen when species that didn't evolve together are brought into contact. Invasive species, organisms introduced to new areas by human activities, often outcompete native species because the native species haven't evolved defenses against them. This disrupts ecosystem balance. Cooperation and partnerships also help maintain ecosystem balance. Not every relationship in nature is about eating or competing. Many species cooperate in ways that benefit both parties. We already mentioned the partnership between plants and fungi in soil. This is one of countless cooperative relationships in nature. Pollinators like bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds get nectar from flowers. In return, they carry pollen from flower to flower, helping the plants reproduce. Both the pollinator and the plant benefit. These partnerships are so important that many plants and pollinators have evolved together, becoming specialized for each other. Some plants can only be pollinated by one specific insect. That insect, in turn, depends entirely on that plant for food. They need each other. If one disappears, the other is in serious trouble. These tight partnerships create strong connections within ecosystems. They're part of what holds the whole community together. Animals sometimes cooperate too. Small fish clean parasites off larger fish. The small fish get food, and the large fish get cleaned. It's a win-win situation. Birds called oxpeckers sit on large mammals like zebras and eat the ticks on their skin. The oxpeckers get food, and the zebras get relief from the pests. Even different plant species can cooperate. Nitrogen-fixing plants, like clover and certain trees, have bacteria living in their roots that can take nitrogen from the air and convert it into a form plants can use. When these plants shed their leaves, or when they pass on, the nitrogen they've accumulated becomes available to other plants. They essentially fertilize the soil for their neighbors. In return, the neighboring plants might provide shade or help stabilize the soil. These subtle cooperations contribute to ecosystem balance. The world of partnerships in nature is endlessly fascinating. Take lichens, for example. What looks like a single organism growing on rocks or tree bark is actually two organisms living as one. A fungus and an alga, or a bacterium, join together in such a close partnership that they function as a single being. The alga bacterium performs photosynthesis, creating food from sunlight. The fungus provides structure and absorbs water and minerals. Together, they can survive in places where neither could live alone. They grow on bare rock in Arctic regions, in scorching deserts, high in mountain peaks. Their partnership allows them to colonize environments that would be impossible for either organism individually. Coral reefs showcase another remarkable partnership. What we call coral is actually a combination of a tiny animal, the coral polyp, and microscopic algae living inside its tissues. The algae photosynthesize, producing sugars that feed the coral. The coral provides the algae with a safe home and access to sunlight in the clear tropical waters. This partnership has created some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, yet they support about 25% of all marine species. The partnership between coral and algae makes all that biodiversity possible. In tropical rainforests, certain trees have partnerships with specific ant species. The tree provides hollow thorns or special chambers where the ants live. It produces small food bodies that the ants eat. In return, the ants aggressively defend the tree from anything that tries to eat it. Caterpillars attempting to munch on leaves are attacked and driven away by the ants. Even larger animals learn to avoid these trees because of the fierce ants. The tree gets protection, and the ants get housing and food. Both thrive because of their cooperation. Some partnerships are so intricate they seem almost magical. Fig trees and fig wasps have evolved together for millions of years. Each species of fig tree has its own species of fig wasp that pollinates it. The tiny female wasp enters the fig through a small opening. Inside, she lays her eggs and, in the process, pollinates the fig flowers. The fig provides food for the developing wasp larvae. When the young wasps mature, they emerge and fly off to find other figs, carrying pollen with them. Without the wasps, fig trees couldn't reproduce. Without the figs, the wasps would have nowhere to lay their eggs. They're completely dependent on each other. These partnerships remind us that ecosystem balance isn't maintained only through eating and being eaten. Cooperation is just as important as competition. The natural world is full of organisms helping each other, forming alliances, creating mutually beneficial arrangements. These cooperative relationships add stability to ecosystems. They create additional connections in the web of life. They allow species to survive in challenging environments by working together. When we look at an ecosystem, we're seeing not just a collection of individual species, but a community of relationships. Some relationships involve one organism consuming another. Some involve competition for resources, and some involve cooperation and mutual support. All these types of relationships work together to maintain the balance. They create a system that's greater than the sum of its parts. Ecosystem balance also involves what happens at boundaries between different ecosystem types. These boundary areas are called ecotones, and they're often especially rich in biodiversity. The edge of a forest where it meets a meadow is an ecotone. The shore of a pond where water meets land is an ecotone. The place where a river enters the ocean is an ecotone. Why are ecotones so biodiverse? Because they contain species from both ecosystems, plus species that specialize in living at the boundary. In the forest-meadow ecotone, you might find forest animals venturing out to the meadow's edge, meadow animals seeking shelter in the forest's edge, and edge specialists like certain birds that nest in trees but hunt in open spaces. These boundary zones allow species from different ecosystems to interact and exchange nutrients and energy. They increase the overall connectivity of the landscape. A deer might spend its day in the forest and come to the meadow to graze at dawn and dusk. In doing so, it moves nutrients from the meadow in the form of plants it ate, back to the forest in the form of waste it produces. This movement helps maintain balance in both ecosystems. The complexity of ecosystems means that balance is maintained through countless interactions happening simultaneously. It's not one simple mechanism, but a web of mechanisms all working together. Food webs control populations. Nutrient cycles provide materials. Energy flows sustain life. Biodiversity provides resilience. Competition limits overgrowth. Cooperation creates partnerships. Disturbances create opportunities. Seasons create rhythms. Climate sets conditions. Soil provides foundation. Water supplies a vital resource. All of these factors influence each other. Change one thing and it ripples through the system. Add a predator and prey populations adjust. Remove a plant species, and the insects that depended on it must find alternatives. Change the climate, and species ranges shift. Increase nutrients in water, and algae blooms. Everything connects to everything else. This interconnectedness is what makes ecosystems resilient, but also vulnerable. Resilient because there are so many connections and feedback loops that the system can absorb changes and maintain overall function. Vulnerable because a change to a keystone species or a critical process can cascade through the whole system, potentially causing collapse. Feedback loops are one of the most important mechanisms that maintain ecosystem balance. A feedback loop occurs when a change in one part of the system triggers a response that affects the original change. There are two types of feedback loops, and they have opposite effects. Negative feedback loops are stabilizing. They counteract changes and push the system back toward balance. Think back to our predator-prey example. When prey populations increase, predator populations eventually increase too. The increased predators then reduce prey populations. This is negative feedback. The initial change, more prey, triggers a response, more predators, that reverses the initial change. The system self-corrects. Another example occurs with plants and nutrients. Imagine a forest where soil nutrients are abundant. Plants grow vigorously. They take up lots of nutrients from the soil. As nutrients are removed, they become less abundant. Plant growth slows. But when plants pass on and decompose, nutrients return to the soil. Availability increases again. This cycle maintains nutrient levels within a certain range. If nutrients get too high, plants use them. If nutrients get too low, decomposition replenishes them. The negative feedback loop maintains balance. Temperature regulation in forests works through negative feedback too. When it's hot, trees transpire more water through their leaves. This evaporation cools the leaves and the surrounding air, much like sweating cools your body. The heat triggers a response, increased transpiration, that reduces the heat. When it's cool, trees transpire less, conserving water and not cooling things further. The forest self-regulates its temperature within limits. Positive feedback loops work differently. They amplify changes, pushing the system away from its current state. Positive feedback can destabilize ecosystems, but it can also drive important transitions. Consider melting ice. Ice reflects sunlight, keeping the area cool. But if the climate warms and some ice melts, the exposed, darker surface, whether land or water, absorbs more sunlight. This causes more warming, which melts more ice, exposing more dark surface. The loop amplifies the original change. This is why Arctic regions are warming faster than other parts of the planet. The positive feedback of melting ice accelerates the warming. In ecosystems, positive feedback loops often drive regime shifts, those transitions from one stable state to another that we discussed earlier. Imagine a lake that's starting to receive excess nutrients from fertilizer runoff. Algae begin to grow more abundantly. When the algae pass on and sink to the bottom, bacteria decompose them, using up oxygen. With less oxygen in the water, fewer fish survive. With fewer fish eating algae and stirring up sediments, algae grow even more. More algae means more decomposition and even less oxygen. The lake can flip from a clear water state to a murky, algae-dominated state through this positive feedback loop. Understanding feedback loops helps us recognize how ecosystems maintain stability and how they can lose it. Negative feedback loops are the foundation of balance. They're nature's thermostats, constantly making tiny adjustments to keep things stable. When these negative feedback loops are strong, ecosystems resist change and bounce back from disturbances. When negative feedback loops are weakened or overwhelmed, ecosystems become strong, less stable. Positive feedback loops remind us that stability isn't permanent. Under the right or wrong conditions, positive feedback can push an ecosystem past a tipping point into a new state. Sometimes this happens naturally. Sometimes human activities trigger positive feedback loops that destabilize ecosystems. The presence of multiple, overlapping negative feedback loops at different scales is what gives ecosystems their remarkable resilience. If one feedback loop is disrupted, others can compensate. A diverse ecosystem has redundancy in its feedback mechanisms. If one species that helps regulate some process declines, another species might partially fill its role. This redundancy, created by biodiversity, enhances stability. Timescales matter too when thinking about feedback and balance. Some feedback loops operate quickly. A rabbit population responds to food availability within months. Other feedback loops operate slowly. Soil formation takes years or centuries. When we observe ecosystems, we need to consider multiple timescales. What looks unbalanced in the short term might be part of a longer-term balancing process. For instance, insect outbreaks can appear catastrophic. A population of caterpillars might explode and defoliate large areas of forest. Trees stand bare and damaged. It looks like the ecosystem has lost balance. But over several years, parasites and predators of the caterpillars build up. The caterpillar population crashes. Trees regrow their leaves. The forest recovers. What seemed like imbalance was actually a natural fluctuation, a longer-term feedback cycle that ultimately maintains the forest ecosystem. Humans often intervene in ecosystems without understanding these feedback loops. We might try to fix what we perceive as a problem, only to disrupt feedback mechanisms and create worse problems. For example, fire suppression in forests seemed like good policy. Prevent fires, save trees. But fire is part of a natural negative feedback loop in many forests. It removes accumulated dead wood and undergrowth, preventing catastrophic fires. Without regular small fires, fuel builds up. Then, when fire does occur, it's so intense that it can overwhelm the forest's ability to recover. By disrupting the natural feedback loop, we made forests less stable and more prone to devastating fires. Scientists study ecosystems to understand these connections and to predict how ecosystems will respond to changes. They build models, do experiments, and observe nature carefully. They've learned that healthy, balanced ecosystems share certain characteristics. They have high biodiversity. They have complete food webs with plants, herbivores, carnivores, and decomposers. They have intact nutrient cycles. They experience natural disturbance regimes. They're not overexploited by any one species. They have habitat diversity. They're connected to other ecosystems. When ecosystems have these characteristics, they tend to be stable and productive. They provide clean water, clean air, fertile soil, and abundant wildlife. They support both wild species and human communities. Balance in ecosystems isn't just an abstract concept. It's something real that we can observe and measure. Different types of ecosystems maintain balance in ways suited to their particular conditions and challenges. Let's explore how balance works in a few different ecosystem types to see both the universal principles and the unique adaptations. Desert ecosystems might seem harsh and simple, but they demonstrate balance beautifully. Water scarcity is the defining challenge. Every organism in a desert has adaptations to conserve water. Plants store water in thick stems and leaves. They have small leaves or no leaves at all to reduce water loss. Some complete their entire life cycle in the brief period after rare rains, growing from seed to flowering to producing new seeds in just weeks, then surviving as dormant seeds through years of dry conditions. Desert animals are equally adapted. Many are nocturnal, avoiding the intense daytime heat. Some never drink water at all, getting all the moisture they need from their food. Kangaroo rats are famous for this. They eat dry seeds and produce extremely concentrated urine to conserve water. Their metabolism extracts every bit of moisture from their food. The balance in deserts is tight because resources are so limited. Plant populations are limited by water. Animal populations are limited by food. A good rainy year can cause a pulse of growth and reproduction. Plants bloom spectacularly. Animals have more offspring. Then, when the dry period returns, populations contract. The ecosystem breathes in and out with the availability of water. This seems precarious, but it's stable over long timescales because organisms are adapted to these extremes. Tropical rainforests represent the opposite extreme. Water is abundant. Temperatures are warm year-round. These conditions support incredible biodiversity. A single hectare of rainforest might contain hundreds of tree species, thousands of insect species, and countless other organisms. The sheer number of species creates a different kind of balance. In rainforests, competition for light is fierce. The canopy, the top layer where tall trees spread their branches, captures most of the sunlight. Lower layers are shaded. Plants have evolved different strategies for this vertical competition. Some trees grow straight and tall, racing upward. Others are shade-tolerant, growing slowly in dim light until a gap opens. Vines climb existing trees to reach sunlight without investing energy in a thick trunk. Epiphytes, plants like orchids and bromeliads, live on tree branches, getting closer to sunlight without rooting in the ground. This vertical layering creates multiple habitats. Different species occupy different heights. Canopy specialists rarely visit the ground. Forest floor specialists never climb. The three-dimensional structure multiplies the available niches and allows the extraordinary biodiversity. Specialization reduces competition. One species of insect might feed only on one species of tree. Another insect might feed only on a different tree species. They coexist because they use different resources. Nutrient cycling in rainforests happens rapidly. The warm, wet conditions speed decomposition. Fallen leaves and passed-on organisms break down quickly. Nutrients are released and immediately taken up by plant roots. Unlike temperate forests, where nutrients are stored in the soil, rainforest nutrients are stored in the living vegetation. The soil is often poor, but the fast recycling means nutrients flow continuously through the system. The balance depends on this rapid cycling. Grassland ecosystems find balance through a partnership between grasses and grazers. Grasses are unique plants. Their growing point is at the base, near the ground, rather than at the tip like most plants. This means grazers can eat the tops without destroying the plant. Grasses regrow from the base. In fact, moderate grazing can stimulate grass growth, making the grassland more productive. Large herds of grazers, like bison in North America or wildebeest in Africa, shape grasslands. Their grazing prevents shrubs and trees from taking over. Their hooves churn the soil, mixing in organic matter. Their waste fertilizes the ground. They create disturbance that maintains the grassland state. Without them, many grasslands would transition toward shrubland or forest through succession. Fire also maintains grassland balance. Grasses survive fire well because their growing points are protected at ground level. Trees and shrubs are more vulnerable. Regular fires set back woody plants and give grasses a competitive advantage. The combination of grazing and fire creates conditions where grasslands persist as grasslands, rather than transforming into forests. Ocean ecosystems present unique challenges for maintaining balance. The ocean is vast, three-dimensional, and constantly in motion. Nutrients can be scarce in surface waters where there's plenty of sunlight. Currents and upwelling bring deep nutrients to the surface in some areas, creating highly productive zones. In other areas, the surface ocean is like a desert, beautiful but not very productive. Marine food webs start with phytoplankton, microscopic floating plants. These tiny organisms perform about half of all photosynthesis on Earth. They support zooplankton, microscopic floating animals, which support small fish, which support larger fish. The pelagic zone, the open ocean, has less biodiversity than coastal areas, but the sheer size and volume of the ocean make it globally important. Coastal ecosystems like coral reefs, kelp forests, and estuaries have higher biodiversity. These areas benefit from nutrient inputs from land and from upwelling. They also have complex physical structure, coral formations, kelp fronds, rock shores that create many different microhabitats. Ocean balance is influenced by large-scale processes. Global currents transport heat and nutrients. The health of the ocean affects global climate, and global climate affects the ocean. It's all interconnected. Changes in one part of the ocean can have effects far away. Overfishing in one region can affect predator populations thousands of miles away. The ocean reminds us that ecosystems are not isolated. They're connected across vast distances. Human activities can disrupt ecosystem balance in many ways. We remove keystone species through hunting or fishing. We introduce invasive species that outcompete natives. We fragment habitats by building roads and cities. We pollute air, water, and soil. We change climate patterns. We alter fire regimes. We drain wetlands. We cut down forests. Each of these activities can throw ecosystems out of balance. But the same knowledge that tells us how we disrupt ecosystems also tells us how we can protect and restore them. By understanding the mechanisms that maintain balance, we can work to preserve those mechanisms. We can protect keystone species. We can control invasive species. We can restore habitat connections. We can reduce pollution. We can use fire appropriately. We can protect and restore wetlands. We can plant forests with diverse native species. Ecosystem restoration is the practice of helping degraded ecosystems recover their balance. It might involve removing dams to let rivers flow naturally again. It might involve reintroducing missing species. It might involve pulling out invasive plants and replanting natives. It might involve adjusting how we manage land to allow natural processes to occur. The good news is that ecosystems want to be in balance. Given a chance, they'll move toward balanced states on their own. Natural processes are powerful. Seeds sprout. Young animals grow. Decomposers recycle. Predators hunt. Prey reproduce. These processes happen automatically. We don't have to engineer every detail. We just need to remove the barriers we've created and let nature do what it does best. As we near the end of our exploration tonight, let's take a moment to appreciate the wonder of ecosystem balance. Think about the forest we imagined at the beginning. Every tree, every bird, every insect, every mushroom, every microbe in the soil, all working together in an intricate dance of life. Nothing is wasted. Energy flows from the sun through plants to animals to decomposers, supporting the whole community. Nutrients cycle endlessly, used and reused by countless organisms. Populations rise and fall in gentle rhythms. Predators and prey track each other through time. Seasons bring changes that species have adapted to over thousands of generations. Disturbances create opportunities for renewal. Cooperation and competition shape relationships. Diversity provides resilience. All of it balanced, all of it connected, all of it sustained by natural processes that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. You are part of this balance too. The oxygen you breathe was produced by plants through photosynthesis. The food you eat came from ecosystems, whether farms or wild places. The water you drink has been cycled through ecosystems, filtered by soil and plants. Your existence is interwoven with the health of ecosystems around the world. Understanding how ecosystems stay balanced helps us appreciate the natural world more deeply. It reveals the hidden connections that make life possible. It shows us that nature is not just a random collection of organisms, but an organized, self-regulating system of incredible complexity and beauty. The balance we've explored tonight isn't fragile in the way a house of cards is fragile, where one touch brings everything tumbling down. It's more like the balance of a skilled dancer, constantly adjusting, always in motion, resilient and graceful. Ecosystems have withstood volcanic eruptions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, and countless other challenges over Earth's history. They bend, but don't easily break. They adapt and persist. This resilience gives us hope. Even ecosystems that have been damaged can recover if we give them the chance. Forests can regrow. Rivers can be cleaned. Wildlife can return. Balance can be restored. Nature has powerful healing abilities when we work with it rather than against it. As you lie here tonight, perhaps ready for sleep, perhaps still listening thoughtfully, I hope you'll carry with you a sense of wonder about the invisible networks that connect all living things. The next time you walk through a park, or look at a tree, or watch a bird, remember that what you're seeing is just one small, visible part of a vast, interconnected system. Underground, fungi are sharing nutrients with trees. In the soil, billions of bacteria are decomposing organic matter. In the branches, insects are pollinating flowers. In burrows, small animals are storing seeds. Everything connected, everything balanced. The natural world doesn't need us to make it work. It's been maintaining balance long before humans existed. But it does need us to stop disrupting it. It needs us to understand and respect the processes that maintain balance. It needs us to make choices that support ecosystem health rather than degrade it. Each of us can contribute to this. We can learn about the ecosystems where we live. We can support conservation efforts. We can make choices that reduce our impact on nature. We can teach others about the importance of ecosystem balance. We can appreciate and protect the wild places that remain. We can help restore places that have been damaged. The story of ecosystem balance is ultimately a story of connection, of relationship, of patterns that persist through time. It's a story that continues every day in every ecosystem on Earth, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains, from tropical rainforests to frozen tundra. It's a story without end, because balance is not a destination, but a continual process, a dance that keeps going as long as life exists. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight, exploring how ecosystems stay balanced. Whether you're still awake, gently dozing, or deep in dreams by now, I hope this journey has brought you some peace and perhaps some new appreciation for the natural world. The ecosystems of Earth will continue their ancient dance tonight and tomorrow and far into the future. The predators will hunt, the prey will flee and hide and reproduce. The plants will grow toward the sun. The decomposers will recycle nutrients. The cycles will continue. The balance will persist. And in that persistence, there is something deeply comforting, something that says that life finds a way, that systems can be stable, that even in constant change, there is an underlying order. You have done enough today. You've learned, you've listened, you've wondered. Now it's time to let go of the day's worries and thoughts. Let your mind settle like leaves falling gently to the forest floor. Let your breathing slow like the rhythm of waves on a quiet shore. Let your body relax into stillness like a pond on a windless evening. The ecosystems will take care of themselves tonight. The balance will maintain itself while you rest. The cycles will continue without your watching. Everything will be there in the morning, still connected, still balanced, still beautiful. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort, Let the gentle processes of nature remind you that rest is natural, that renewal happens, that balance is not something you have to create, but something you can trust in. From all of us at the Sleepy Library, sleep well, dream peacefully, and may you wake tomorrow with fresh appreciation for the intricate, balanced, beautiful world we're privileged to call home. Good night.